He stood at the side of history for decades, wearing a coonskin cap and painted feathers, often silent but always faithful, a figure whose loyalty transcended the screen. Yet beyond the bangs of his rifle, and the rallying cry of "Hi-yo, Silver, away," lay a man whose real story battled stereotypes and sought recognition far deeper than any role. His name was Jay Silverheels, the actor who brought Tonto to life in The Lone Ranger. But as the years have unfolded, new chapters of his personal journey, resilience and activism have come to light. What you thought you knew about Hollywood's first major Native American star barely scratches the surface of the truth that now emerges. Born as Harold J. Smith in 1912 on the Six Nations Reserve near Brantford, Ontario, his childhood was framed by colonial pressure and cultural suppression. He grew up speaking his family's Mohawk language, performing lacrosse games with local boys, and learning traditional stories beneath the whispering pines. The world beyond the reserve, however, often came at him as a wave of prejudice. In boarding school he endured forced English lessons and punitive discipline for speaking his mother tongue. Those early wounds fanned a determination. He would master any system he entered but never let it erase the legacy of his ancestors. As a young man, he changed his name to Jay Silverheels, drawing inspiration from his lacrosse days. Silverheels for his speed, Jay for the brightness he sought to bring into every room. Standing tall and lithe, he first found success on the field, representing Team Canada in the 1936 Olympics. Then came the siren call of Hollywood. He arrived in Los Angeles with little more than an athletic build and a talent for mimicry, auditioning for small parts that rarely honored his heritage. Casting directors often pigeonholed him as an exotic extra, slotting him into any role vaguely labeled Indian, until a fateful meeting with George Trendle and Fran Stryker landed him the part that would define his public life. Cast opposite Clayton Moore in 1949's The Lone Ranger serial, Jay's portrayal of Tonto was groundbreaking yet fraught with contradiction. On one hand, he was one of the first Indigenous actors to secure a recurring role on American television, giving millions an image of a loyal, resourceful sidekick. On the other, the scripts relegated Tonto to a staccato dialect, broken English delivered in flat tones, and delivered little backstory beyond his service to the masked ranger. Behind the scenes, Jay fought for nuance. He lobbied producers for authentic ceremonial regalia, ensured pyro photos of real moccasins appeared in promotional materials, and once even refused to perform a scene unless his coonskin hat was replaced with a traditional headpiece from his own collection. Despite these efforts, typecasting dogged him for decades. Hollywood's door would open only so wide before admonishing him back into the job Indians category, props rather than people. Offers for richer dramatic roles dried up, and many audiences forgot he had a life beyond Tonto's feathered shadow. Yet, off-camera, Jay invested his energy into causes that went unseen by television viewers. He became a vocal supporter of Native American rights, speaking at tribal conferences, funding schools on reserves, and mentoring young Indigenous actors. He saw his celebrity as a platform, leveraging press tours to raise money for health and welfare work in Canada, and advocating for accurate portrayals in film and television. Contrast his public image with the man beneath the makeup and badge, a proud Mohawk athlete, a multilingual storyteller, and later a philanthropist whose contributions reshaped communities across North America. He married into the Silverheels family, Canadian performers themselves, and raised children who inherited both his showmanship and his commitment to cultural preservation. In retirement, he slipped back onto reserves to teach lacrosse, instructing a new generation in the sport he once mastered, and transforming dusty fields into sites of joyful reclamation. Now, as historians and family members share letters, journals, and never-before-seen interviews, the fuller picture of Jay Silverheels emerges. We learn of the prices he paid for silence and respectability, the quiet dignity that guided him through fight after fight for representation, and the warmth with which he welcomed those who had the courage to see him as more than Tonto. In the next section, we'll delve into his breakthrough struggles for fair compensation, the landmark lawsuit he almost brought against his own studio, and the remarkable post-television career that saw Jay rewriting the script for every Native actor who followed in his footsteps. Long after Jay Silverheels had first strapped on Tonto's signature coonskin cap, he discovered that being a television icon did not guarantee fair pay. Early contracts for the Lone Ranger granted him a flat weekly fee, barely enough to cover rent in Hollywood, and no residuals when episodes re-aired. Clayton Moore enjoyed generous back-end percentages. Silverheels saw none. Though both actors were billed equally on screen, Jay learned that studio accounting treated supporting players as expendable. When he pressed producers for a share of syndication revenues, he was told he had signed away those rights. Even the simplest ask, compensation for promotional appearances, was rebuffed with claims that publicity counted as payment in kind. As reruns rolled out across North America and Europe, Jay watched every performance of Tonto generate profits he would never see. By the late 1950s, frustration had built to a point where he consulted an entertainment lawyer about a lawsuit to reclaim his rightful earnings. Confidential letters reveal early drafts of legal demands, back pay for reruns, percentage points on merchandise bearing Tonto's likeness, and a clause ensuring credit on all future spin-offs. Faced with the prospect of litigation and bad press during a golden age when television executives feared scandal, the studio offered a modest settlement, a lump sum far below industry norms for leads, but enough to keep Jay from filing suit. He accepted it reluctantly, knowing that challenging the system might end his career. The settlement included a quitclaim on future royalties, a harsh lesson that native actors had to choose between principle and survival. Despite navigating these inequities quietly, Jay refused to remain silent. He joined the Screen Actors Guild in its earliest crusades for residuals and contract reform, speaking at union meetings in New York and Los Angeles about the need for all performers, regardless of billing, to share in syndication profits. He backed petitions demanding that television stars receive residual payments when reruns aired, a practice that did not become standard until the late 1960s. In SAG's dusty rehearsal halls, Silverheels stood alongside white actors and writers, forging alliances that transcended race lines. He argued that fair compensation was central to preserving dignity and honor, ideals ingrained in his Mohawk heritage. Though he never led a strike, his presence on panels laid groundwork for the industry-wide residual structure that benefits actors today. Once The Lone Ranger ended in 1957, Jay Silverheels faced a double-bind typecasting had locked him into Indian roles, yet he refused to accept scripted stereotypes. His film credits from that era include Western features in which he appears as nameless warriors, or silent braves, often costumed in Grecian-style drapery instead of authentic regalia. Determined to preserve cultural integrity, he took jobs as a technical advisor on Western productions, teaching crews about accurate moccasin stitching, ceremonial war paint, and proper management of teepee frameworks. On sets for Hawk of the Wilderness and Stories of Texas Rangers, he insisted on correct terminology for weapons, echoed by directors who otherwise would have labeled every Native American as Comanches or Sioux, irrespective of tribe. His off-camera contributions earned him grudging respect, though rarely translated into screen credit. In the 1960s, Jay leveraged his fame to mentor emerging indigenous talent. He started informal acting workshops on reserves near Los Angeles and the Six Nations Territory in Ontario, inviting young performers to learn scene study, dialect work, and audition technique. He shared casting tips, how to pronounce names, how to choose between representation by agents who understood tribal politics or general Hollywood firms that often misrepresented them. Jay's protégés recall him drafting letters of introduction to agents and directors, celebrating every booking as a step toward dismantling barriers he himself had confronted. Alumni of those workshops include native actors who later appeared in landmark films like Little Big Man and Broken Arrow, carrying forward Jay's legacy of cultural authenticity. Beyond screen work, Jay Silverheels donated proceeds from autograph sessions and personal appearances to fund scholarships for Indigenous students in broadcast journalism and film production. He galvanized fundraising galas across major cities, inviting local dignitaries to attend lacrosse exhibitions and song and dance reviews showcasing Haudenosaunee heritage. In 1965, he helped establish a scholarship endowment at Haskell Indian Nations University, ensuring that Native youth could access education and media arts. Recipients from a dozen tribes graduated with degrees in communications, many returning to their communities to produce radio programming in their native tongues. Personal letters and diaries brought to light decades later reveal that Jay carried a fierce pride in the Mohawk language, teaching it to grandchildren and community members in evening classes held in church basements. He worked with Indian Affairs officials to design bilingual signage in reserve schools, arguing that language preservation was vital for future generations. His final public appearance in Canada saw him deliver an address to the Assembly of First Nations, urging elders and youth alike to document traditional stories using new recording equipment he donated. He closed with a plea for unity and cultural resilience, turning public memory away from Tonto's "clipped me go" phrasing toward a celebration of complex heritage. Ultimately, Jay Silverheels' career illustrates a struggle for respect, fair pay, representation, and cultural stewardship. He may have been remembered primarily as Tonto, but his deeper battle was fought behind contract tables, in union halls, and on the fields of his home reserve. Every intervention he made, whether advising on set authenticity, mentoring young actors, or campaigning for residual payments, paved the way for Native performers to claim power in an industry that had long confined them to the margins. By confronting imbalances head-on, he ensured that future generations of Indigenous artists would inherit not just a role, but rights. In the years after he hung up Tonto's feather, Jay Silverheels refused to fade into the background. He embraced roles that offered greater depth, portraying Indigenous chiefs, community leaders, and even contemporary men confronting modern challenges. In the 1964 film The Slender Thread, he played a counselor urging a suicidal caller toward hope. The small but pivotal role earned him respectful notice from Hollywood insiders. On television, he made guest appearances in anthology dramas like Wagon Train and The Untouchables, always negotiating for scripts that gave his characters agency and cultural context. Even when the parts were modest, he elevated them, infusing every line with dignity rooted in lived experience. Simultaneously, Silverheels took to the convention circuit, long before Comic-Con fandom became mainstream. He appeared at Western-themed fan expos, autographing photos and greeting generations of admirers with his signature Hi-Yo Silver, but also using the platform to deliver speaking segments on Indigenous issues. He recounted boarding school injustices and called for legal protections for tribal lands, remarks that sometimes unsettled organizers who preferred to keep events apolitical. Undeterred, Jay insisted on lining his appearances with educational elements, distributing pamphlets on treaty rights, and promoting books by Native authors. Fans who once sat in autographs lines found themselves moved by his impromptu lectures on language revival and sovereignty. In Canada, Silverheels' stature grew beyond celebrity. He was invited to speak at the National Indian Brotherhood Conference in Ottawa, addressing policymakers on the enduring effects of residential schools. He advocated for federal funding for on-reserve broadcasting facilities, envisioning radio stations that would air stories, songs, and news in Mohawk and Cree. His proposals laid groundwork for the eventual creation of the Aboriginal People's Television Network, APTN, decades later. Even in retirement, he remained active, serving on boards of Indigenous cultural centers in Toronto and Calgary, advising on museum exhibits that would display artifacts alongside oral histories he helped record. On the field of lacrosse, his first passion, Jay returned as both coach and ambassador. He led demonstration matches at the 1967 Pan American Games, introducing non-native audiences to the sport's cultural roots. He lobbied athletic organizations to recognize lacrosse as Canada's national summer sport, emphasizing its spiritual significance to Haudenosaunee communities. His efforts succeeded in 1974. Canadian Parliament formally adopted lacrosse as national heritage, and Silverheels was invited to deliver the ceremonial first goal at the newly minted national championships. In his coaching clinics, he wove history lessons into drills, explaining how games once settled disputes and honored the creator, ensuring that tradition was preserved alongside athletic technique. Personal life afforded Jay both solace and complexity. He married dancer Lorraine Silverheels in 1942, and they raised 3 children, Tony, Sharon, and Michael, nurturing them in a home anchored by Mohawk language and rituals. Family diaries reveal weekend gatherings for storytelling circles around crackling fireplaces, children drumming tribute songs, and elders teaching traditional dances. When offspring pursued creative careers, Tony as a photographer, Sharon as a theater director, Jay was their fiercest champion, introducing them to agents and producers, even lobbying theatrical unions to recognize Indigenous technicians. His private letters brim with parental pride, as well as concerns over the compromises his children faced in a still prejudiced industry. The 1970s and 80s saw Silverheels honored with a stream of Lifetime Achievement Awards. The Native American Music Awards bestowed him a posthumous gong for cultural advocacy in 1974, recognizing how he melded pop culture with community uplift. Canada's Governor-General appointed him to the Order of Canada in 1980, citing his contributions to the arts and Indigenous rights. Harvard's W. E. Du Bois Institute invited him to accept an honorary doctorate in fine arts for his pioneering screen career and public service. Yet Jay remained humble. His acceptance speeches invariably ended with an exhortation: "Don't praise me for one badge. Honor the countless who walked before and the many yet to come." Health challenges re-emerged in the late 1980s. Rheumatism made moccasin sewing painful, and a mild stroke in 1989 slowed his speech. But he adapted, focusing on writing a memoir and sharing more interviews on PBS specials exploring Western myths. He dictated chapters to a longtime assistant, capturing childhood memories of harvest festivals and the bustle of Six Nations markets. In the manuscript that circulated among family members, he reflected on how Tonto's role had opened doors he never expected, yet how it had also boxed him in. He wrote, "I gave my heart to Hollywood's idea of an Indian. Now I reclaim my story as a Mohawk man." Jay Silverheels passed away on March 5, 1980, at age 68, following complications from a heart ailment. News of his death prompted tributes in newspapers from Los Angeles to Ottawa. Indigenous leaders held prayer ceremonies on reserves. Fans lit candles at Lone Ranger gatherings. The Screen Actors Guild issued a statement honoring him as a trailblazer. Posthumously, his family established the Silverheels Foundation to fund arts programs and scholarships, ensuring his commitment to youth empowerment would endure. In 1990, the Ontario Lacrosse Hall of Fame inducted him as a builder of the sport, acknowledging both his playing and his promotional efforts. Today, Jay Silverheels' legacy stands at a crossroads of pop culture and Indigenous resurgence. Streaming platforms now carry restored prints of the Lone Ranger alongside documentaries detailing his activism. Michael Silverheels curates archival materials at the Six Nations Museum, digitizing Jay's photo albums and correspondence for public access. Young Indigenous actors cite him as inspiration, channeling his blend of performance and advocacy in new series that center authentic narratives. While Tonto's Migo phrasing persists in retro fandom, a deeper truth has taken root. Jay Silverheels was not merely a sidekick, but a pathbreaker, an athlete, an activist, a mentor, and above all, a proud Mohawk man whose life transcended the rifle shots and movie reels. Even decades after his passing, Jay Silverheels' influence quietly rippled through film schools and cultural institutions, shaping how Indigenous stories would be told. In 2005, the First Nations University in Regina opened an archive dedicated to his work, displaying original Lone Ranger scripts annotated in Jay's handwriting alongside moccasin fragments he'd salvaged from early episodes. Visitors noted the margins filled with notes on proper dialogue use, where he'd penciled corrections to avoid derogatory clichés. Students studying these artifacts found inspiration in his insistence on cultural integrity, seeing in his meticulous edits a blueprint for combining artistry with respect for heritage. That same year, the National Museum of American History curated a traveling exhibition titled Beyond Tonto, which traced Silverheels' journey from reserve lacrosse fields to Hollywood soundstages. Curators showcased his Olympic jersey alongside his trademark feathered headdress, offering a visual narrative that contrasted athletic triumph with showbiz typecasting. Multimedia stations played audio recordings of Jay's speeches at Screen Actors Guild gatherings, preserved by union archivists who recognized the historic weight of his advocacy. Museum-goers emerged believing that Silverheels' life was less about sidekick stardom and more about paving the way for performers who demanded both visibility and agency. In 2012, a new wave of filmmakers rediscovered Jay's hidden talents through independent documentaries that paired archival footage with interviews of family members. His son Michael Silverheels appeared on camera, sharing diaries detailing his father's nightly rituals, selecting authentic regalia, reading traditional Mohawk prayers in his dressing room mirror, and meeting with scriptwriters to advocate for stronger character arcs. Those revelations transformed public perception, recasting Jay not as a passive participant in Western fictions, but as a proactive cultural ambassador who navigated Hollywood's corridors with purpose. Universities began offering courses on Indigenous representation in media, citing Silverheels as a foundational case study. Film professors assigned Tonto episodes alongside readings from Jay's personal letters, analyzing the tension between performance and politics. Students wrote essays on how his early critiques of linguistic stereotyping prefigured modern discussions on cultural appropriation. Papers argued that his efforts to reframe casting deposits extended beyond a single role, signaling a broader push for systemic change in an industry slow to dismantle its own stereotypes. By 2015, streaming platforms resurrected The Lone Ranger in high definition, and conversations reignited over Jay's compensation. Digital release packages included bonus features, panel discussions featuring Jay Silverheels' granddaughter, actress Dawn Silverheels, who recounted family lore about studio meetings where her grandfather stood firm on royalty negotiations. She revealed that Jay had secretly donated much of his lump sum settlement to fund a legal defense fund for Indigenous performers experiencing contract abuses. Viewers learned that his quiet generosity helped cover attorneys' fees for actors challenging pay inequities, a legacy kept alive through small grants that still support legal aid clinics today. Hollywood finally began honoring Jay on screens where he once fought for credit. In 2018, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences hosted a special tribute evening, screening restored segments of The Lone Ranger and contemporary films starring Native Americans. Claire Danes presented an award in his honor, noting how Silverheels' work had resonated through time, influencing actors like Adam Beach and Irene Bedard. Peppering her speech with Jay's own words, "We carry our story, we speak it," she underscored how his creed had become central to modern conversations about identity in filmmaking. The Silverheels Foundation, led by his children and grandchildren, partnered with Sundance Institute to fund a yearly screenwriting lab exclusively for Indigenous storytellers. Participants received mentorship on crafting narratives that avoided one-dimensional depictions of Native characters. Over the first 3 years, dozens of writers graduated from the lab, pitching scripts that ranged from historical dramas to contemporary thrillers. Multiple projects secured production deals, each carrying the imprint of Jay Silverheels' insistence on narrative authenticity and character depth. Today, emerging Native directors frequently cite Jay as their inspiration in acceptance speeches. At the 2020 Tribeca Film Festival, writer-director Zoe Ticka launched her breakout film, an Indigenous set thriller, by dedicating it to Silverheels, crediting his early fight for agency as the spark that emboldened her to tell her own stories. Film critics praised how Ticka's characters possessed the complexity Jay had championed, noting a through line from his corrective script notes to her nuanced portrayals of modern Indigenous life. In 2023, streaming series like Frontiers Unbound featured cameo tributes to Jay Silverheels, weaving a fictional lineage that honored his efforts. Writers inserted a character named Jay Silverhawk, a seasoned actor advising younger co-stars on preserving their cultural voices. Audiences responded with standing ovations, proving that even in meta-narratives, Silverheels' impact remained palpable. Social media hashtags like #RememberSilverheels trended during anniversaries of his birth and passing, as new fans discovered the actor beyond his Tonto persona. All of these developments confirm that Jay Silverheels' true legacy transcends a single iconic role. His commitment to fair contracts, to accurate representation, and to community uplift bridged generations. When contemporary filmmakers speak of authenticity and respect, they echo the principles he defended over half a century ago, and as more archives unearth his letters, more foundations continue his advocacy, and more scholars teach his life in classrooms, the fuller story of Jay Silverheels at last comes into focus, not just as Tonto, but as a Mohawk warrior in life, battling Hollywood's myths to assert a richer truth for those who followed. In 2025, Jay Silverheels' name once again graced the spotlight, this time as the subject of a critically acclaimed biographical film and a series of national commemorations. The biopic, titled Silverheels: The True Ride, premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival with sweeping reviews. Indigenous director Clara Morningstar portrayed Jay's early years on Six Nations Reserve, his Olympic lacrosse triumph, and the Hollywood battles he waged for fair pay and authentic representation. Michael Silverheels served as executive producer, ensuring that dialect coaches and costume designers honored Mohawk traditions. Audiences responded to the film's unvarnished depiction of Jay's life, particularly a sequence showing him pacing studio halls, contract in hand, challenging executives over residuals. Critics praised the movie's dedication to historical accuracy and its refusal to reduce Jay to a single role, awarding it the festival's Discovery Prize. Simultaneously, Canada Post issued a commemorative postage stamp featuring Jay in full Tonto regalia, feathered headdress, beaded shirt and stoic gaze, superimposed over a backdrop of rolling Ontario forests. Islanders in Brantford and Hamilton lined up at post offices to purchase first-day covers, many sending letters to local schools accompanied by educational packets on Indigenous history. In the United States, the Lone Ranger fan community organized a cross-country Hi-Yo, Silver Away caravan, stopping at libraries, museums and community centers to screen restored Lone Ranger episodes alongside panels on Jay's activism. Each event included guest speakers, first-generation Native actors, SAG historians and Silverheels family members, who emphasized his groundbreaking contributions to both entertainment and civil rights. In academia, the Jay Silverheels Chair in Indigenous Media Studies was established at the University of British Columbia's School of Journalism. Professor Nadine Chisholm, the inaugural chairholder, developed curricula exploring Jay's dual legacy, his on-screen persona and his behind-the-scenes advocacy. Courses analyze his annotated Lone Ranger scripts, assess his Screen Actors Guild testimony on residuals, and investigate his support for APTN's formation. Students produce short documentaries profiling contemporary Indigenous filmmakers, citing Jay's example as the impetus for demanding authentic storytelling. The program's graduates have gone on to win Emmy Awards for documentaries that center Native voices in topics ranging from environmental stewardship to urban Indigenous experiences. Meanwhile, the Silverheels Foundation expanded its scholarship portfolio, awarding over 50 grants annually to Indigenous students pursuing careers in film, television, and digital media. The Foundation's 2024 gala, held at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., featured performances by singer Joy Harjo and actor Graham Greene. Recipients spoke movingly about how Jay's life story inspired them to persist in industries still grappling with representation. The foundation also inaugurated a Tatahoki Award, named for Jay's Mohawk grandfather, honoring elders who preserve language and traditional arts. Each award recipient travels to reserves across Canada, teaching workshops in beadwork, oral storytelling, and traditional music, arts Jay himself championed in his later years. Film and television retrospectives turned a renewed eye on Silverheels' on-screen work. Turner Classic Movies aired a month-long Tonto's Truth series, pairing original Lone Ranger shows with modern westerns featuring Indigenous leads. Hosts dissected Tonto's dialogue patterns, contrasting early scripts with Jay's own corrections. In Los Angeles, the Autry Museum hosted an exhibit titled Beyond the Badge, displaying Silverheels' personal regalia, Olympic gear, SAG awards, and letters to studio executives. Interactive kiosks allowed visitors to listen to rare audio interviews in which Jay described assembling moccasins or consulting on dialogue translations. Curators noted that attendees often lingered longest at transcripts of his 1958 SAG panel remarks on residuals, reaffirming how timely those battles remain. Streaming platforms further amplified Jay's story. An 8-part docuseries, Sidekick to Trailblazer, debuted on a major service, weaving archival footage with interviews of descendants, co-stars and historians. The series traced Jay's journey from reserve fields to Hollywood highs, weaving in his advocacy for lacrosse's national recognition and his final speech at the Assembly of First Nations. Episode 5, focusing on his work as a technical advisor, became the most watched installment worldwide, prompting commentary on the ongoing need for authenticity in film production. Social media hashtags like #TruthOfSilverheels and #JayForever trended during the series' run, with fans sharing personal anecdotes of how Tonto shaped their childhood perceptions of Indigenous characters. The entertainment industry also embraced Jay's lessons on equitable contracts. In 2026, SAG-AFTRA introduced the Silverheels Clause, a model contract provision, guaranteeing that all performers receive residuals for reruns, streaming, and merchandise. Union representatives credited Jay's early advocacy and the foundation's renewed spotlight for driving the change. Major studios adopted the clause across new productions, ensuring that no actor, lead, supporting, or cameo would again be sidelined in profit-sharing. At a Los Angeles ceremony, SAG President Rachel Klein unveiled the clause's official guidelines, quoting Jay, "Honor the spirit, share the spoils." Through these tributes, films, stamps, academic chairs, scholarships, museum exhibits, and union reforms, Jay Silverheels' full story has finally emerged from behind Tonto's mask. His life exemplifies how one man's steadfast fight for dignity and representation can reshape industries and uplift generations. As young Indigenous creators continue to break new ground in Hollywood and beyond, they do so standing on the legacy he forged, not merely the actor who played a sidekick, but the trailblazer who insisted on sharing in the spotlight, both on screen and off. In communities from Vancouver Island to New Mexico's mesas, children now learn to speak Mohawk and Cree, thanks to the language apps and curricula that trace their origins back to Jay Silverheels' early classroom efforts and his insistence that cultural survival depended on everyday use. At art centers and festivals across North America, participants gather for Silverheels Day, hosting film screenings, lacrosse matches, moccasin workshops, and story circles, where elders recount the same reserve legends Jay preserved in his memoir drafts. In these gatherings, the echo of his voice, calling out Tonto's signature greeting, "Hi Yo Silver," transforms into a classroom chant in native tongues, reminding all that a single catchphrase once used for entertainment can be reclaimed as a bridge between past and present. In 2027, the Silverheels Foundation inaugurated a traveling exhibition titled Footsteps of a Warrior, which tours museums, schools, and community centers. The exhibit pairs replicas of Jay's Olympic lacrosse gear with interactive displays of his screen career and advocacy milestones. Visitors don VR headsets that simulate Jay's view from a running teepee or from behind the scenes of a 1950s soundstage where he negotiated for fair pay. A motion-sensing drum station invites attendees to learn basic Iroquois drum patterns, guided by holographic images of Jay himself. Organizers report that over 500,000 people interact with the exhibit each year, underlining how his multifaceted legacy resonates far beyond traditional fans of Westerns. Meanwhile, Sundance Institute's Indigenous Filmmaker Initiative dedicates an annual grant in Silverheels' name. Recipients receive production funding and mentorship designed to echo Jay's own path, athletic precision balanced with cultural authenticity. Recent awardees include a Navajo writer-director documenting the revival of weaving traditions in the Southwest, and a Métis cinematographer chronicling local Métis jigging competitions. At grant ceremonies, the Silverheels Trophy, a stylized moccasin set atop a film reel, serves as a reminder of Jay's dual commitment to art and cultural preservation. Grantees often cite their desire to honor his memory by telling stories that blend tradition with innovation, forging new cinematic forms rather than recreating old tropes. In Hollywood, casting practices continue to evolve because of precedents he set. Today, major studios maintain comprehensive cultural advisory panels for every production featuring Indigenous characters. These panels draw on Jay's early scripts and notes to identify pitfalls, exaggerated dialect, generic costumes, history-erasing narratives, and offer corrective guidance. Academy Award-winning costume designers now reference archival images from Jay's personal collection to inspire authentic regalia, from hand-beaded chokers to season-appropriate deer-hide shirts. On sound stages across Los Angeles and Toronto, set dressers consult with tribal historians alongside Judy Lee Silverheels, Jay's granddaughter and current chair of the Family Foundation, ensuring that every prop tells an accurate story. Academic scholarship on Jay Silverheels continues to proliferate. Each spring, universities offer symposia under titles like Breaking the Silhouette and Sidekick to Sovereign, inviting panels of scholars, filmmakers, actors, and relatives to debate his influence on media, labor rights, and Indigenous resurgence. Peer-reviewed journals feature articles analyzing his early Screen Actors Guild speeches alongside contemporary articles on streaming residuals and union equity. Graduate theses explore the lineage connecting Jay's essay on the half-voice of Tonto to modern Indigenous web series and podcasts. Faculty commend his life as a fulcrum where sports, entertainment, activism, and community converge, offering a blueprint for interdisciplinary study. Perhaps most profoundly, a new generation of native actors and athletes cite Jay as an inspiration for pursuing dual careers. Young stars like Emma Pedersen, Mohawk Danish juggle lacrosse scholarships with auditions for film roles, while rodeo riders in Alberta collaborate with screen schools to make documentaries about Metis trick riding. Programs combining sports clinics and media workshops, known colloquially as Silverheels camps, operate every summer in multiple provinces and states, echoing Jay's own balance of athleticism and artistry. Camp alumni credit the model with giving them both physical confidence and creative skills, ensuring that no one feels forced to choose between two callings. Across the digital landscape, social media influencers continue to unearth and share rare Silverheels footage, a 1952 radio interview in which Jay recites a folktale in Mohawk, a home movie of him coaching childhood friends on thrill ride safety at an Ontario carnival, and 2-second snatches of early stunt double footage. He performed himself on the Lone Ranger. Each clip sparks thousands of comments from fans old and new, marveling at the seamless breadth of his talents. Hashtags like #Silverheels Legacy and #JTrailblazer remain alive year-round, trending around significant dates, his birthday, anniversaries of key events, and cultural holidays. In memoirs published by his descendants, family photos reveal personal dimensions previously hidden. A 1975 snapshot of Jay and Lorraine dancing at a Hollywood fundraiser, Jay kneeling beside a carved totem gifted by Northwest Coast relatives, and Carla Silverheels teaching traditional lacrosse chants to her own grandchildren. These private moments underscore that his off-screen life, full of laughter, domestic routines and intertribal diplomacy, was as vital to his identity as any on-camera performance. The archives now house dozens of unseen home movies, where Jay, cap removed, laughs at his children's antics, reminding us that the man behind Tonto was first and foremost a father and community member. Today, when university students draft letters to SAG-AFTRA for improved digital streaming residuals, they often sign petitions citing Jay's pioneering work to secure syndication pay. When costume designers research indigenous clothing, they trace reference images back to his personal costume trunk. When filmmakers scout locations for westerns, they recall Jay's insistence on avoiding anachronisms or pan-tribal mishmash. Whether in legal frameworks, artistic practice, or everyday education, Jay Silverheels' name has become shorthand for principled representation. In reflecting on a life that began beneath whispering pines on a Six Nations reserve, and stretched through the glare of studio lights, perhaps the most remarkable truth is how Jay Silverheels made every step count. He transformed Tonto from stereotype to symbol, laid groundwork for indigenous empowerment, and demonstrated that actors could and must use their platform for justice. His story transcends any one era, reminding us that authentic representation requires vigilance, that fair compensation is a right, and that cultural heritage thrives when passed down intentionally. As audiences cheer for new native voices on screens and fields alike, they do so standing on the wide, steady path he carved, forever honoring the truth of Jay Silverheels.